Oh, good morning, Peggy.
Good morning, good morning.
Still not live on mine.
Mine.
Neither, neither, either, either.
Me neither.
Here we go.
Oh,
What?
I'm in my live chat disappear.
Oh, no.
All right, here it comes.
Yeah, I'll say I'm live on mine.
Cool.
Good morning.
Yep, good morning. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Let's go ahead and get started.
Welcome to Books We Never Read.
Except for those we have.
I'm Nicole.
I'm Jason.
And this is episode 44 of Books You Never Read, where we'll be discussing Well Met by Jen DeLuca, chapters 9 through 16. Right?
Through 16. I only read 9 and 10.
No.
I'm just kidding.
9 through 16.
I read 16. And we're going to talk about it.
But he was dead. He was like, that whole last chapter. If this is your first time joining us, please make sure this is the episode that you really intend to be watching. We talk about the book, the covered portion of the book, as if you have also already read it. So if you haven't started Well Met by Jen DeLuca, please hop back one and pick episode 1 for this book, so that way you know where we are, what we've already talked about, and you can be part of it. If you have any comments while watching live, please pop those in the live chat. If you have any comments about the book or about the show in the replay, please pop those comments in the comment box under the video. If you have any recommendations for us, please pop those in the comment box as well. It's time for us to announce our next book, and I'm very excited about what that might be. And my last little announcement is, our videos are, or our episodes are playlisted in like the Google Podcast, YouTube Music situation. Yeah, YouTube Music situation, YouTube Podcast situation. Yeah. And our discussion also goes off of YouTube onto Goodreads. So you can find us at Goodreads at Books We Never Read.
Yeah. We're everywhere.
Woo! Well, not really, but we're very googly.
Yeah. I want to say good morning to Omni Collective Creativity, because I don't think I remember that name from last week. We had a new person last week too, but welcome. We're glad you're here for this one, because I'm going to use words I've never said. I'm not really.
Yeah, he was kind of like, how do we talk about this?
Oh, no. It's fine. It's fine. We'll discuss.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Good morning, Shelby. Shelby, do you see? Can you see it?
It's not. Oh, yeah, there it is.
Yeah. It's on there.
Well, Shelby made us this cross stitch that says "Wham Bang" from Flanders Panel, which was the best line out of that whole book.
Yeah,
for sure. So we really appreciate it, and now we have it.
We've got it framed in a vintage gold frame.
Yeah, it's nice.
Shelby says I do. Yeah, and Omni Collective Creativity says morning humans. Mm-hmm. Omni Collective Creativity, if you are somebody who's been on the channel before and you just changed your name, let us know. Yeah, but I don't recognize your picture. Yeah. Shelby says, nerd grinning ear to ear. Yeah. We grin ear to ear every time we see it too. It just makes us giggle. Yeah. It makes us happy. Mm-hmm. That's a really cool thing about this show, and this is a good little reminder to everyone, and a little note to anyone new popping by. We read all kinds of stuff, and we go way out of our comfort zones to read things that we wouldn't normally read. And even when, the book isn't what we wanted it to be, or we didn't like it as much as we thought it would, there's still really cool stuff we get from it. Yeah. Flanders Panel being the prime example.
I still play chess.
Of that.
Almost
he got really good.
That's not true. I'm terrible.
No.
But I did improve significantly from where I was at.
Well, that's all that matters. Omni Collective Creativity says, hi, Shelby. I have a unicorn character in one of my stories named Shelby.
It's a work in progress. Yeah,
Nice.
Very cool, very cool. I want to hop on that real quick. So as we start the discussion, I was excited about this book because it was highly recommended to me. I had no idea what I was getting into. I just naively did not understand. I am glad that we're reading this because... And so, we had to have a conversation yesterday while we were driving around about, what can I say about this? Because this is not a book that I would have naturally picked. It's a book I was excited about because it was recommended as, fun and quirky or whatever. And it is that. Um, but I think I'm learning something from this book, right? Like I have learned something about myself, which is why I read sometimes. Mostly we read to escape ourselves. But if you can learn, then changing yourself is the second best, right? So um, I'm glad that we're reading it because I didn't expect to learn something, and I think I have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you ready to go into that?
Well, no. Let's continue on. Tell me what you think so far. Right, we're halfway through. Usually, this is the slow week, right?
Right.
It ain't the slow.
It
week.
was not. It was a spicy week. So so a couple of things, right? Like storyline wise.
Mm-hmm.
Something happened to Stacy in this section of the reading. Like Stacy got dumb. I don't know. And I thought that it was just because I had switched from reading the physical book to go into the audiobook that Stacy just maybe her voice was different than I thought it would be, and so I thought that she just sounded kind of dumb. But
They made her dumb.
Jason had also mentioned the same thing. He's like, "What happened to Stacy this week?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh!"
Stacy's been working this fair for 6 years or whatever.
And
10
she like
years.
knows how to get you dressed. She knows everything about it. She's very like welcoming and open, and she like brings Emily in right away. She seems so cool.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden she can't figure out that they're down by half of their staff. Like, what is that? It was disappointing. And I was legitimately disappointed by that because I like Stacey as a character, and I don't think it was necessary to like. It was just like this weird slight to somebody that I thought was cool.
It was just like all of a sudden she's unorganized and kind of
yeah. Spacey.
Spacey Stacy. Yeah. What happened?
Yeah.
Bring back cool Stacy.
Yeah.
Which I mean, you can be cool and spacey, right?
Sure.
I mean, maybe I see too much of myself in this.
Oh.
Oh no. I'm cool and spacey.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that was like the first thing that jumps out at me, right? Because
weird.
that's like the original conversation you find out about pub sing or whatever they do, and you know, she doesn't remember why they can't go, right? It's okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, that was...
I think that's actually my first note. Why is Stacy dumb? That's my first note.
Yeah. Okay, so to get caught up on chat a little bit.
Sure.
Shelby says, keep a lookout in the mail for a Dune cross stitch. Last one, I promise. Well met does not get one. Okay, well, just so you know, Shelby, we are a family that appreciates handcrafts. I appreciate cross stitch, and we love it. So, you know, we're very excited about it. Very excited about the Dune one. I miss Dune, by the way, everybody. Neither here nor there. Omni Collective says, a book, be it satisfactory or lackluster, can bring valuable lessons in either what is enjoyable, what is not, or expand one's horizons in both simultaneously, or of things in the world.
We're glad you're here.
That is absolutely the value of books.
Yeah.
You have branched out, you have gained a vicarious experience, right. And somewhere in your brain processes that as real knowledge.
Yeah.
You know, and so you are now more equipped to handle something.
Yeah.
Peggy says, this book has given me strong feelings. I'm angry and I want to shake her. So yes, let's pause there for a moment.
Yeah.
I also want to shake her. You know, we're getting this from her point of view. So that means that we're also getting some of her biases, but we're also getting we're ignorant to some of the things that she is also ignorant to, but we're also seeing how she's feeling about Simon. And she even acknowledges that Simon reminds her so much of her old boyfriend and how he makes her feel.
Yeah.
And if red alert, just get out of there. If someone makes you feel like garbage, you shouldn't also want to make out with them.
Like, do I know that this happens to people? Sure I do, right? Like, it's the devil you know sort of thing, right? Like, I understand what I'm getting into, so, like, this is safe in a weird way, right? But it's also like a cat eating its own vomit, right? Like, just, what are you doing?
That was the worst.
It is.
Simile.
It is. It is. Why are you doing this? There's perfectly good food around. Have you met Mitch?
We really like Mitch.
I like Mitch. Look, I want to say a couple things real quick because we talked about this yesterday, right? And just for the benefit of everybody, before I like continue to rail against things that have upset me, some of y'all know and some of y'all don't know, and I've alluded to it several times on the show. But my background is in psychology, and so like I think about these things and like how people interact or whatever. But what I really do is I work with people who have committed sexual violence, right? That's what I do all day long, right? In prison. Um, and so I am no stranger to talking about sex at all. Like, they pay me for it. I am quite unused to talking about it in a positive way. And that's something that I think I've realized, like, while reading this book. And chapter 16 in particular was weird because because I didn't know how to handle like a description of something that was healthy and maybe healthy, I don't know, but like they were all here for, right?
Healthy in terms of they're both consenting adults and they both clearly want to be part of
but
this.
So I have some issues with some of the other things that have happened, and I'll say that too, right? But you know, it's Emily falls into there's this sort of like stereotype of like abused women who just keep going back to the same thing, and like that does happen. But why does that have to be my hero in this book, right? Like we can all agree that happens and be like, but I'm just not going to try to identify with that person right now, you know, or whatever. I'm going to find something a little more uplifting, and I hope she heals, right? Like I hope that's where this book goes. But as of right now, it's not great, right?
So part of me wants to give both of them a little bit of a break. You know, we are a bit older than they are in this book.
True.
And so we have experience and a little more chilled hormone levels than what they have.
Yeah.
You know, so they're at a point in their lives where things are still very quick and racy and hormonal and, you know, you don't really know how to process all your emotions quite right. I mean, they are fully formed adults, but in terms of brain development and emotional development, they're still a little immature.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to give them a break.
Well, I think most people are immature. I'm not gonna use age for it, right? Like,
you know, they have some room to grow.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess. Yeah, that's true, right? They have room to grow. But and I guess me, as the hobbit I am, want to read about a relationship where everybody's like good to start with.
Yeah.
And they stay good, and that's nice, right? But like we know it's, I guess we hit Act 2. I don't know, but like there's the part where everything falls apart. It kind of hit it, but not really. I imagine it's going to get worse, and then it will get better because that's how this goes, right? Like we have to follow the arc. But
this might have a plot pyramid where it goes up, and then down. The down is not as steep.
Yeah, maybe
you know, something bad happens right at the end, and then they wrap it up.
But before we get back to chat, I want to say this too. I do not like Simon at all. And it is because of the way he starts this chapter, or this reading, basically. When he's fighting with Emily and decides he's going to kiss her. That is unacceptable in my mind, right? Entirely unacceptable.
Don't yell at me and then kiss me.
That is assault. And I spend a lot of time telling people that that's assault. And so I don't know, man. Like that part just really bugged me out. And I don't find it hot. I don't think it's wow, look at them. No, he didn't ask. There was no consent. In fact, if anything, there was. They're fighting, right? So that is not consent. And then he just does this, and then like it's rewarded, right? Ultimately, right. And I don't know. I don't like. That doesn't. I'm glad this book is not for guys because guys should not.
It's a bad lesson.
Yeah, it's not good.
Yeah. And again, you know, this is middle-aged adults looking at the follies of a young adult.
Right. Well, and I also get that most people wouldn't. I think plenty of people would look at this and be like, "That's not cool," but I have a much stronger reaction, perhaps.
Yeah.
Than a lot of people.
No, but I also felt like it really wasn't cool.
Yeah.
I did not like it. This is not a, you know, these are two people that are just working on a summer fling, and that should be fun and exciting and fairly healthy, depending on your opinions about these things. But it's the way that they're approaching it. They're coming at it very like volatile, and they're yelling at each other, and that's not cool.
Yeah.
So that it's concerning.
We gotta go way back up. Sorry.
Yeah.
Y'all been talking.
Yeah. And so Peggy wants to shake her. Yeah, shaking.
Got that.
Agreed. Shelby says Stacy got thrown under the bus too by her fellow fair people. Yeah.
They're just kind of doing her dirty in general.
Yeah, they are. They're all playing into this, you know. And because she's an outsider, she doesn't know everybody, and she doesn't know all the rules, and she doesn't know all the the intricacies of all their relationships. Shelby says it seemed like an easy excuse to fuel the Simon and Emily argument, and that's referring back to suddenly making Stacy dumb.
Yeah.
Yeah. Peggy says she's repeating abusive patterns. Simon treats her like garbage 98% of the time, but she likes his leather pants. She's enjoying the abuse and leaping into it. Emily will be the woman who tells her friends he's not like that all the time and cover the bruise.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's really important. I don't know. I don't know what I expected coming into this, and again, I hope that this ends well. And you're right, this gives them room to grow.
I feel like we're taking this part of it too seriously, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not sure. And, do understand, we both are really enjoying
I'm enjoying this book.
Yeah, but then there's the responsible side of us that's like, people are seeing this message, and that's a little concerning. Yeah. And I'm split between it. I'm split between, like, they're kids and they're figuring it out, and they've got to learn this lesson at some point.
Yeah. I'll put it this way. So I don't like Simon because I am now convinced that he's a sexual assaulter person, right? If I had seen that happen in my actual life, I would have got myself involved, right?
Yeah.
Like that's all there is to it. And I don't think I can separate myself from that. And because you have to bring your experiences to this, right?
It's all you can do.
Yeah, I'm very protective of people in vulnerable situations, and Emily's walking into it, but it doesn't matter.
Peggy also said, had she talked to her sister about it, I'm hoping the sister would have told her this isn't healthy.
Yeah, I don't think she does.
That's a really good point, Peggy, because from Emily's point of view, we hear her realize that she hasn't caught her sister up to speed on how all of this is really playing out. Yeah. And when you're not telling other people what's going on, that's kind of your first indication that somewhere within you, it's not quite right. Yeah. We're really...
We spent way too long on this. I'm sorry.
I'm not. These are things that need to be said. These, relationships are complex, and they just are. Well, and this is an important topic.
But I mean, it is, right? Because how many... Look, I'm going to say right here that somebody making out with you without your consent is sexual assault. I'm going to say it, right? And I hope we all agree, but I'm going to say it. But how many people have had that happen to them? Like, how many people have been, maybe not make out, right? Because I feel like it takes two to tango, but, had the initiation happen.
Right.
So many people. And it's important to recognize that, hey, that's still sexual, and that is not okay.
Right.
So.
Right. And, you kind of mentioned that, sorry, we talked about this yesterday, and we kept saying, we have to stop talking about the book, but then we couldn't stop talking about the book. But, where's the line? Somebody grabs you without your consent. Somebody kisses you without your consent. Somebody, goes further without your consent.
That's the line.
Right. Yeah. It's all the line, past the line.
Well, so there's this fallacy that consent is she returned the kiss, that is consent.
That was consent to the kiss.
Correct. Consent is not a permission slip. It is a ongoing agreement of every second of a thing, right? It continues, because at some point somebody's going to cross the line, and you're like, whoa, not that though, right? Or whatever. That's fine. But it all passes. It all crosses the line for me. Right. I like things black and white. Put it in writing. Let's make sure everybody is A-okay with this.
Oh. Shelby says, Emily made some pretty mature decisions to quit college to support a man. I didn't trust her decision-making with relationships since that moment.
Yep.
That really hurts my heart, right? Just dealing with Emily's past relationship and where she is now because of those choices she made. She was in a relationship. She was doing what she thought she was right. She was helping somebody out under a contract, right? I'll help you, you'll help me, we're helping each other because we're in a committed relationship together. Yeah. But ladies, this is just a reminder. Until those bank accounts are joint, don't be helping anybody out. Make sure you're in a common law state if, getting married and all that stuff, half and half.
I agree that we have room for Emily. I don't really care if the relationship has room to grow, right? Because it's like a summer fling, and the book's going to end at the end of fair. I don't mean the
relationship itself, but the individuals.
Yeah, and I don't care if Simon grows because he's not my narrator. I want Emily to grow. I'm here for that. And I think we can explore what an unhealthy relationship is, because like how many people do have whatever the guy's name is in their past?
Mm-hmm.
Lots of people have that.
Mm-hmm.
And overcoming that and exploring what an abusive and manipulative relationship is like, while also having like small pitfalls that don't include sexual assault. I feel like that's doable.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter. I'm gonna stop. But the point is, I don't like Simon. I can't like Simon now. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah, Emily's definitely going into like fix-it mode with Simon. You know, he has this arrested development, right? Like he has not grown since his brother died. He was living in his brother's shadow, and now he's still living in his brother's shadow. Yeah. He needs to go to counseling.
Sure.
And Emily doesn't need to be the one that's fixing.
I'm not done. I want to add one more point to this, and then I'm done. The part where Mitch is playing what we would classically call the wingman, and everybody is acting like Mitch is dumb because he's big and likes to fist bump people. And Mitch is probably
really upset about it.
I like Mitch, and Mitch is over here playing wingman for Simon. And Simon's like, oh, I've never known that he could be subtle or whatever. It's all very insulting, right? Mitch is the only person who has like a coherent plan in this entire thing and is pulling it off, right? But Mitch invites Emily to come over and see the fight because he wants Simon to fight for her, right? Like that's what Mitch tells us later at the bar. Simon, at that fight, kisses Emily, and we find out later that he does it to try to make Mitch mad.
Right.
That's not healthy either.
Right.
That's all. That's my point. I'm done here. Sir, this is a Wendy's.
Very much not healthy. Oh, man. I had something to say.
I'm enjoying this book.
Sounds like we're not, but we
I am. I really
am. Okay. Back to the chat. This book is trying to teach the lesson from preschool where he's mean because he likes you.
And look, does that happen? It does. And if it happens to you, that should be the first sign that this guy's development got arrested a little early. And maybe I should continue on. People say you can't help who you fall in love with.
That's a lie.
Beg to differ.
You can.
You cannot help who you feel feelings for.
Right.
Love is, like consent, a process, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can fix that. You can do that.
Get out of there.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Where's
Mitch at?
Oh, major, not mature typo. Well, we still made it work, Shelby. You're good. You're good. Peggy says, with age comes the lessons we learned from all the mistakes, hopefully. I also don't like Simon. That's what Peggy says. And so back to just some of the character development and stuff. Emily does acknowledge that, she misjudged everybody. She misjudged Mitch, thinking he's just a big meathead.
She did.
And she acknowledges that he's actually sweet and likable.
And intelligent.
He's smart. Yeah, he's funny. He's good looking. Like all these things. Yeah. He's just a well-rounded little dude. And she also acknowledges that she misjudged Simon. And I know that y'all don't like Simon. But, she was interpreting his actions as hostile. And so we were interpreting all of his actions as hostile. But no one else really seemed to understand why she thought Simon was so terrible.
Stacy says, and
he's intense.
I don't know. At some point, she's like, he's like that, right? Like he's intense. They say more than intense. Either her or the bookstore lady. Somebody says more than intense at some point, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's, like hostile, right? And I agree. Like maybe somebody misinterpreted, but it is your responsibility as the speaker to make sure that your message comes across clearly.
Yeah.
And he has not done so.
Yeah. His emotional maturity is just way too low.
Yeah.
Peggy says she agrees about the love control. I'm in charge of my logic and my pants. Yeah.
And if you say that you're not, you're dangerous to society in general.
Right.
That's all there is to it.
Right. So there was a couple of strong points in this section of the reading that kind of hit me in my feels. One was as Emily's learning more about Sean and how everyone feels about Sean, that whole concept that we tend to glorify the dead, that even the mistakes that they made after they're gone, we turn into endearing stories about their character. And it's very easy for Simon to continue falling into the shadow of his brother. He was already larger than life, and now that he's dead, there's just no way to, in Simon's mind, to step up to who his brother was. Now, in real life, again, he needs to go to counseling. You can't try to live up to what somebody else is. That's ridiculous, because you can only be you.
Right. Well, yeah.
But just that concept that, like, we forgive the misdeeds of the dead, typically. We glorify that, and they become someone else in our mind, someone more perfect and memorialized.
I mentioned this yesterday, and what we would probably call the deal with Emily and Simon, I would call transference, right? She has this past relationship with her boyfriend, and she sees some of him in Simon, and in trying to regain that past relationship, she's doing it with Simon, right? Like she is trying to regain that lost thing with Simon, and so that is what transference is. But Simon has transference like with a dead person, right? Like it's really interesting, right? Like he has this relationship with somebody who is no longer there, where he is trying to like live up to this thing, and at some point he also has to let it go, right? Like they're both dealing with these past relationships that is dominating their present relationships in a way that isn't really giving anybody the chance to operate healthily. So.
Absolutely. Peggy says hurt people hurt people. These town people haven't tried to help Simon, and they just accept that he's a poop head. That is a very good point. For all of this family that the Ren Fair is, someone needs to step in and tell Simon, like, dude, you've got to get yourself under control. Of course you're hurting. Go get help. You can't lash out at the world around you.
Right. And, Simon is doing all this stuff to live up to his brother's memory, and if our other sources are being trusted, his brother wasn't working that hard at anything,
right?
Ever.
So who was doing all this work? He just like conned everyone into doing all this.
Yeah, I mean, like it happened or whatever, but he wasn't like a control freak, right? But that goes to the point of Simon doesn't remember that. Like he is thinking of his brother pulled this off maybe on his own. This has nothing to do with the fair. This has nothing, and this is another thing too, right? Is sometimes when people are in strong relationships, they lose their identity to the person that they're in the relationship with, right? They have no friends. They don't know what they like to eat. And it seems that Sean was likable enough that he was like that kind of dominating force. And when Sean dies, the only identity that Simon has is Sean, so he tries to become Sean in his own weird, not Sean way, right? Like he is now zombie Sean, right? Which is not a, it is undeath. It is not the thing that died. It is something else now. Right? Yeah. So.
Shelby says, I want Simon to get better, but didn't realize how much Emily was accepting the messed up behavior. And Peggy says, when they describe Sean, sounds horrible, I'm sorry. It reminds me of Hitler. Why?
He was kind of an underachiever, and everybody liked him. I mean, I guess.
He was just a voice who got others to do everything. She says, I'm sorry. I know.
I didn't expect that to happen today, but I
see it.
I see it.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
It does. I get what you're saying. It's, this just there's a lot of manipulation going on.
Well, okay, so
in this book,
I want to hop back to the thing I said I'm going to talk about again, right? And that's another thing that bothers me, right? There's a certain type of person who will. So there's a certain kind of person who will become friends with women, waiting for them to become broken so that they can capitalize on the situation. Right? Like that's a thing. Yeah. That's the thing, right? And we have certain like things that we call it. I won't repeat them here. They're not necessarily inappropriate, but I don't know. And so like, but there's a kind of guy that does that, right?
Yeah, I don't like that word. But that's the one I'm thinking of.
No.
Oh, okay.
No. Like this is there's absolutely nothing wrong with saying. I'm just not going to.
Oh, okay.
But there's Simon is doing that, but instead, what he's doing is using his character as a way for him to live out his sexual fantasies with Emily, right? In a way that, so Blackbeard or whatever can do it, but Simon won't, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's using the cover of I'm being in character to be able to do these things that he may not be able to do in another way, right? And I find that to be like underhanded and kind of skeezy. And like, yes, they're in character or whatever, and you know, if that's the deal, that's the deal. But it has to be in the script, right? Like, then I'm cool with it, you know.
Right.
But he's it's underhanded and manipulative, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the way I see it, I guess. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I do like the development of Emily planting these roots into this town.
Yeah.
Deciding, getting to a point where she's realizing, like, oh, I might want to stay.
Yeah.
And, I like working at the bookstore, and I like Chris, and I like, people asking about me and checking in on me and caring about me. So, I mean, we do see that growth in her in that capacity. She was just surviving and helping her sister as a distraction.
Right.
Now she's settling, planting her roots. And I think this infatuation with Simon will likely fade away as she becomes more stable and healthy and balanced.
Right.
When you're off kilter, you're just not making good decisions. And
Sure,
I think that's what's happening here.
Well, she doesn't have an identity in this town yet either.
Right.
Peggy says, can we talk about the trauma for April and Caitlin? And and that's a good point. I think it's really interesting. Talk about like April's PTSD, can't drive and stuff like that.
And Caitlin can't sit in the front seat.
Yeah. I think that's a really, like, this book could absolutely basically be the same thing without those elements, but those are real elements, and watching them overcome those things and watching them work together to overcome those things is cool. April's like 12 years older than
something like that.
that. I have a sister that's 10 years younger than me, and whenever I'm reading this, I see a lot of that, right? I was out of the house by the time she was interesting, or whatever, right? Like, whatever Emily's words are. And it's interesting because, like, I feel like we've only ever really known each other as adults. You know? Like, she was 8 when I left.
Yeah.
And she was an adult by the time she was like 15 or whatever, right? Like, people are little adults. And so, I see a lot there.
Yeah. And it's nice to see just the relationship building there. The moments where Emily realizes, like, oh, this is the first time we've ever had a heart-to-heart, and this is the first time I've ever asked a question like this to my sister, and them appreciating that while they missed all this time before, neither of them were in the place to build this relationship before, but they are now. And you don't have to regret the time that you missed. You just have to appreciate the time that you have. And that's a really beautiful thing. I love this for Caitlin, that she's getting to grow up with her aunt, as just another presence of a woman in the house. I just think that, the three of them together is really sweet and cute, and it warms my heart to read that part of it.
I think I like small towns. I like small towns, particularly if they're next door to big towns. And apparently they're close enough to Baltimore-ish that, it makes sense or whatever. But I enjoy small town feels. And whenever people are like, I just don't like small towns, so you're just saying that because you think you're cool, right? Like, that's all there is to it. You're just hating for no reason. But I also grew up with no family within like 1,000 miles, right? And I really like the whole, I have an aunt and uncle or whatever, and I have a niece and nephew now that I don't get to see that often, but I enjoy being there for them because I only got to see family maybe once a year or whatever. And I'm glad that they get to have that. Everybody I knew when I was a kid, like, all their family lived in like the same clearing in the woods, right? Like, they were all there. And it's real common here for there to be just, or especially where I'm from, for there to be like generational families, just and probably where you're from too, right? Just people never leave, and that just wasn't my experience with family. And so I think I like it. Family sticks together.
Growing up, I got to spend a couple of weeks in the summer with this aunt, a couple of weeks with this aunt, and I really loved that time with them. It just, I don't know, there's just something really special about it. And so I'm glad for Caitlin that she's getting these memories. And this was something I didn't mention last week too. You know, Caitlin is very. We don't know a lot about Caitlin because this book isn't about Caitlin, right? But from what we see and from what Emily sees about her, she's very comfortable with herself. She knows what she's doing. She has her group of friends. And Emily, when she sees Caitlin like at the Ren Fair, Emily's confidence in herself grows because she's feeding off that confidence that Caitlin exudes, you know? And so I really like that, and I think that that's a really nice point. You know, we can learn from the generations below us and the generations above us and the generations beside us. You know, it's we can gather so much from them, and we're never in a position where we can't learn from other people and we can't build from their vibe. You know, and I really like that.
Well, they can now communicate like telepathically or whatever, right?
Yeah, they've got the eye. You know.
Yeah, I think that's fun. I enjoy that, right? I mean, like that's like when you can start talking to somebody without words. That's how you know you have a connection. You know,
and this can happen with actual blood family or the family that you create.
Yeah,
you know, this doesn't have to be real blood family.
Yeah. I really enjoy this for Caitlin. I've said this a couple of times now. I was an actor when I was a kid. I was a terrible actor, but I was an actor. And I think that part of why I'm good at what I do now is because of that acting experience. And by what I do now, I'm including this book club. I can just get up confidently in front of people that I don't necessarily know and just say things, right? But it helps you. It helps you just gain that confidence, right? And you know, it helps you play a role. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with playing a role because everyone is doing it. Even if you are playing yourself, you are playing a version of yourself at all times. There is nobody who is not playing a role.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. Shout out to like getting into acting as a kid. You know, I think that's a really good activity to get kids involved in.
I got bamboozled into it.
I mean, who cares how you got there? But it is a good skill to learn that. And you mentioned this with Simon acting in a way because he's a character and how that can go too far. On the healthy side of that, acting as a character can teach you that you do have those abilities within yourself.
Sure. So, you know? Yes. You know, he became a pirate because Sean told him to be a pirate. But he is Blackbeard, right? Like he is. He made it. He's doing it. It's not like he's being possessed by something. So
quit being a punk and just take the best parts of that.
Just be Blackbeard.
Just be that.
And I say that, and now I think back to I had a friend who was Jack Sparrow once in a production that we did, and then he never stopped being Jack Sparrow. And it was odd, but it worked, I guess. But that was the thing that happened. And that's very relevant to this conversation.
Wow.
But he would like do the whole like Jack Sparrow hand and talk, and it just never went away. Like he adopted that persona.
Got stuck in character.
Yeah, but what I meant earlier was like if it calls for you to kiss a girl,
right? That needs to be in the script.
Whatever.
Yeah. That again, the consent matters.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't just like swing that stuff on people.
And I guess they could say, well, they were handfasted, so whatever. But like that should be in the contract. Like you should have that conversation.
Right. Okay, Peggy says, you see the small steps April is taking to make friends, so Emily's helping her to open up. Yes. That is really cool. April's like, hey, I guess I joined the book club.
Well, and like, how cool is that for somebody to come and be like, we realize that you can't make it, and that's horrible of us.
Yeah.
That person was judged and thrown out at the beginning of the book.
Yes.
And that is exactly the kind of person that I would like to be friends with. Somebody who realizes that they were just inconsiderate. Not on purpose, but like, that you may not feel included, and we would like to find a way.
And, you know, I think that that's a motif that's building in this book is our perceptions of other people and how we misjudge things. Yeah, sure. April saw that as an intentional attack, that they kept planning things while she was at work. And that's because she's defensive of the fact that she's a single parent, she's exhausted, you know, she's doing all this work, and she feels like she can't have time to make friends.
Right.
But that was a misjudgment. And maybe had April just told someone who extended that invite, I would love to be in the book club, but it needs to be in the evening.
Right.
Had she just made that one extra step, you know, an addendum to the invite or whatever, all this time she could have been part of the community.
Yep.
But it took Emily coming in and kind of opening up the opportunities for relationships to build.
Right.
For that to happen. But these are good lessons for us to keep in mind. You can't take everything personally. Nobody is thinking about you like that. You've got to give back and
well, especially when people think that somebody has behaved badly towards them and then they continue to do so, but you have never attempted to correct that behavior, I don't know what to do for you, right?
Yeah.
I wrote a list of rules this week because that's what I do sometimes. And one of my rules was if you have a problem with someone, you need to address it first. If you can't handle that, like if you have addressed it and has not been resolved, then I will become involved, right?
Was this at work?
No.
Oh.
But I have similar rules at work, right? Like you should try to if you have a problem with somebody who works for me, right? If one of my inmates has a problem with one of my counselors, you should address it with that person before you come to me. Or if you're a counselor and you have a problem with them, you should address it with them, tell them to correct their behavior. If they don't, then I'll get involved.
Right.
But the idea that like people just like run around and talk about each other and nobody like told somebody like
it wears me out.
I ain't got time for all that.
It wears me out.
Yeah.
But again, we are a little older than the people in the book.
And quite hobbitish.
Okay. Shelby says, Caitlin seems to be most settled, cool, adjusted, not awkward 14-year-old ever.
Agreed.
Yes, a little bit too much so, but again, it's because this book isn't about her, And I'm quite glad, because I would be very uncomfortable if we were reading a romance novel about children. That would be weird. Peggy says, taking method acting to a weird level. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
People often do.
Marjorie brought casserole. Yeah. That was the casserole lady that was like, I realized the book club was at a bad time for you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Marjorie.
So also on here, somebody says that April wasn't concerned when Emily didn't come home. I don't know if maybe I didn't read far enough. I don't really remember. Does Emily go home at the end of 16?
No.
Okay.
Because I read the first sentence of 17 and she was like, I learned that he's a snuggler and so am I. She woke up the next morning at his house.
Let's talk about 16 for a second.
Okay.
I didn't know that when people said, I'm reading a romance novel, that they were reading pornography. I didn't know. And so now whenever I'm like on the train, when I'm on a train for some reason, and somebody's like, I'm reading this great romance novel, I'll be, oh, do you want me to move? Right? Like,
I need to leave the room.
I'll leave you your space. I didn't know. That being said, I want to say a couple things. It made me feel weird because I felt, and I told this to Nicole, so I'm going to say it to the group. If I were to watch, not quite the scene because they wouldn't put the scene on a TV show, but if they put basically this scene, somewhat edited on TV, it would not bother me. And I think it's because I think when I see things on TV, like it's meant to be watched, and so I'm supposed to be there, right? Like I get that feeling. But whenever I read it, it makes me uncomfortable, and I feel like it's because they don't know that I'm here. Like the characters didn't know, and I'm not supposed, like this is their time. I'm not supposed to be here. And it made me feel weird because I was like intruding on their private time. So I think that's interesting. That there's a difference in medium for me.
And I want to hear what other people think about this too, because I see it the opposite way. I'm more comfortable reading it than I am watching it.
Yeah. Now, like if I'm in the room and like there's a kid or like my parents or something, I'm gonna feel weird. But it's because I'm like, that's my mom, right, or whatever. but like in general, I think there's a difference in medium. The second thing I want to say is that I think more books should have sex scenes. Because I think it's weird when you go through like all of Dune and there isn't one. I think it's weird. And like fantasy books will be like kind of have, like they don't have to be explicit. I'm not saying that. Mm-hmm. But what I'm saying is like, it's probably the single most common activity on the planet.
Right.
And the fact that it just doesn't show up is contrived, right? Like it is not real. And is it necessary for a story? No. But is it real? Yes. Yeah. And, so like I think about Wheel of Time, and spoiler alert, Rand gets like 3 or 4 wives. It's crazy. And they kind of hint that he has sex, right? Like it is hinted. It might even be a little more explicit at some point. But I feel like that's a healthy, he has these wives. That should happen, right? Like and we should be aware that it happens. because it makes their relationship more believable. And I think about like all the science fiction books we've read where like that doesn't happen, and all the fantasy books where it doesn't happen. And I think people think because it's sort of like a taboo subject that they should avoid it. And it's weird to me that it is a taboo subject because again, it's the most common activity on the planet, and nobody talks about it. Come on, like come on.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm glad this was here, right? I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know it was going to be explicit. After I read chapter 16, I googled, is well met spicy? And the answer Google gave me was no.
Right, and so that made me want to ask you guys who have read other romance books, because we're both new to the romance genre. What is the degree of spiciness of this book, and how do we scale that? Are we going 0 to 10, 10 being the spiciest, like you're sick the next day spicy, and 0 being not spicy at all?
Right.
What's the spiciness level of this book? I, with no other... with nothing else really to like compare it to, I had this pretty unspicy.
Interesting.
Yeah. I don't know, 4.
Okay. See, I'd give it like slightly more than necessary. So like
You were thinking
6.
like an 8?
No, like 6. Right? Like 5 being like the appropriate amount of spice. I don't know, whatever. And 0 and like 1 being like you forgot to put it in the book, right? Like I don't know. So
yeah.
But
my 1 is like tension.
Yeah. My point being like I'm glad it was in here because I think it's necessary for this sort of story. And I wish that there would be more things, not quite as explicit because I don't think it's necessary, but in other books.
Yeah.
Because and just talking about sex in general, I think it's a left out topic that should find its way into more genres.
Yeah.
And it just should.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just the topic, you know, it's, okay, hold on. Let's see.
Yeah.
We got to get caught up on the chat. Peggy says, I'm so uncomfortable knowing we're reading this. And Shelby says, it was too perfect of a scene for her. Everything they wanted to happen did.
Yeah.
Good point. In reality, things are a little more
like
real.
Nobody had to go brush their teeth.
Yeah.
Like,
Ew, yeah. Y'all been drinking? Anyways, Peggy says, I felt like a group of people watching dirty movies together, and it's icky. And Peggy says, all that aside, this chapter felt like 2 different authors. Nice author turned super dirty with some word choices.
you know, that actually is interesting. It did hit very differently.
Yeah.
That is interesting. I'll think about that.
Peggy says, also, if they went all night, didn't Simon only have 1 condom?
He did.
And Shelby says, I have no other books to compare to. And Peggy says, it's a 6 so far, only because of word choice. It's not 50 Shades. And that's also
okay, so that's fair. I have read that.
What?
I did. I forgot about that.
How do you forget about that?
Well,
right? So, like, when that book came on the scene, people were like, whoa.
And
right?
Rightfully so.
And I hadn't read it, but considering the level of woe that came from 50 Shades, that's what made me think that this book is probably only like a 3 in the spiciness. If 50 Shades is the woe.
Is that the woe? Is that like the woe? It might be. I don't know. I mean, it was many, many years ago. Somebody read it and was like, you should check this out. And read it in like an afternoon, whatever.
Shelby says the logistics of this chapter skipped some stuff that I guess wasn't spicy, so the author didn't include it, aka teeth brushing.
Well, if I'm saying I want sex to be included in my fantasy novels because I think it's realistic, I want toothbrushing to be included in my romance novels because it is also realistic. I'm going to be fair.
And again, we're way overthinking all of this. Like, the whole point of this is just to be, like, cute and kitschy and...
Right. No.
You
and
know,
like, still,
they had a misunderstanding. They talked it out. They both realized that they both are very interested in at least flinging with each other for the summer.
Yeah.
And so they have flung.
Yeah. The flung is flung.
It's easy, right?
Look, I'm on board. And like, am I overanalyzing things? Yes. And I said that earlier. I know it because I'm bringing a lot of baggage to this book, apparently, that I didn't necessarily know that I had.
Peggy says 50 Shades is the woe.
Okay. Got it. That book, I honestly found that
Did you read the whole thing?
The whole thing.
What on earth? How do you forget that?
I mean, it was like 12,
That
13
was a long
years
time
ago.
ago.
I read it like when it came out. Somebody had it. They read it. You should check this out.
I'm wondering about this.
I mostly found it to just be weird. I was just like, oh. Okay. I don't know. I mean, it was just. I think mostly I was just like, why are people reading this?
Yeah.
The story wasn't good. The
Uh-oh.
scenes in particular weren't good because they were weird.
Oh.
I'll tell you later.
Um, Shelby says she started seeing more references to April not knowing anything about Emily's activities becoming a topic for the last part of the book.
Mm.
Oh, Peggy says bet $1 she
Oh.
gets pregnant. Oh no.
And now she lives here. That's how it happens.
Oh, shucks-a-roni.
Little corset's gonna start getting tight.
So-
Bodice, I'm sorry. I hated that scene too. Wasn't that what it was?
Yeah.
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 Simon just can't help himself. He
Oh,
just
man.
can't help himself.
So another part of the story that caught me in my feels was that one very quick scene with April and Emily talking, the fortune cookie thing, and Emily was like, you know, how do I know if I'm worth it? What a horrible point you're at where you're asking, and worth what? Doesn't matter what the it is.
Right.
If at any point you're asking, are you worth it?
Mm-hmm.
That's a bad point to be. And I mean, that scene happened so fast. I was getting ready in the morning. I had it on audiobook. And I mean, in that moment when that happened, like my throat closed up.
Mm-hmm.
It like my whole, and like the tears like hit the back of my eyeballs, but it didn't come out because it like moved on so fast from that. But that just hurt my feelings so bad for her.
Mm-hmm.
And not hurt my feelings, but I was in my feels
Yeah.
for her in that moment. That's very sad, you know, to think that as hard as she's worked and as much as she thought she had a plan and she had a partner and there was a commitment, for her to be at the end of that and think, well, she just must not have been worth.
Mm-hmm. Well, because that's the signal that she's been given. So. But again, that comes from, you know, the only evidence that we have that she might not be worth it is from this one dude, right? And again, that comes to like healthy relationships. You should diversify your portfolio of friends, and maybe not lovers, right? Stick to one, but you should diversify the number of people that you're hanging out with, right? Because whenever he goes away, I mean, do your thing, whatever, right? Live your life, write your book. I don't care. But my point, I wanted to make sure it was very clear what I was talking about. My point being is that you only decide you're worthless because the thing that was giving you all of your value is now gone, right? And it's just, you should be able to diversify your value, right?
Right.
You should be, she doesn't have college. She's a bartender, right? Which is like a looked down upon job or whatever, right? She hints at that several times. You know, this boyfriend leaves her. She has to move in with her parents or her sister or whatever, right? Like all these different things. But if she had just like a little more going on, like, yes, that's a big part of your value. But there would be somebody there to be like, you're worth something. And that's why her relationship with her family is so important, right? Because that's where she immediately falls back to get her value from. That's not enough for her. She needs Simon. It's unfortunate, but here we are.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And you know, that's part of an unhealthy relationship. You know, if you're with someone who is a bit abusive or just abusive, manipulative, they isolate you slowly. You don't realize it at first until you realize that they are your only source of everything. Information about what is real and what is not real, what is valuable, what is not. It's a bad situation.
Well, she tells the scene of how she went to this like law firm meeting with her boyfriend, and he kept introducing her as his friend Emily, and it wasn't even his girlfriend; she was his fiance at that point. And so, like, if I went somewhere and you were like, "This is my friend Jason," I'd be like, "Oh, so like we're done now, right?"
I'm like, I'll leave you here. I'm gonna catch an Uber.
Yeah, like what is that?
See you never.
Yeah,
that was terrible.
Yeah, that was bad news. I didn't like that.
That was terrible. Shelby says knowing that Mitch and Simon are both teachers and students are seeing them act these characters out is strange for me. Yes. When I was a teacher, there was a group that took a bunch of kids to Ren Fair, the one in Texas, in the Woodlands. And I was never interested in going with kids. I dressed up as a Viking and I was fully covered, and that was fine the time that I went to the Ren Fair. But what if I did want to wear something that made me a
wench?
Yeah! I wouldn't...
You can wear that.
Kids already can't control where they look.
Yeah.
It's bad. You might have a button that's slightly askew, and then you've got a kid looking at your chest all day. Yeah. They can't control it. It's so horrifyingly embarrassing. I am not going to be responsible for a group of kids where there's just a bunch of like buxom ladies everywhere. Like,
Pirates and
men in kilts who might not have anything on underneath it. I don't want to be responsible for that. Fair. That's oogie. I think the Ren Fair is an adult place. That's just me.
Fair enough.
Anyway, Peggy says, I told a friend this summer she's worth it. Kept saying it because obviously she doesn't know. Yeah. Peggy, I'm so sorry, but thank you for
but people, even if they do know, I think, was it you? No, I'm just.
Was it me?
Yeah, you're worth it.
Thanks.
Yeah, but people deserve to be told that, right? They just should, even if they know it. It'll
hit you in your feels sometimes when you're feeling.
Yeah, just be like, hey, you know what? You're awesome. Hey, you know what, guys? Y'all are awesome. Thanks for being here for an hour.
Oh my goodness!
We gotta wrap this up.
It's 10:56. Yeah. Golly. Okay. Yeah. If you've got anything else to say in the chat, throw it in there because we need to let y'all go. Peggy. Okay. Peggy says Emily needs to know. Oh, sorry. Emily needs to be the ice cream in her sundae instead of the crushed nuts or the cherry. That is a beautiful way to say it, and you say this all the time. That you're supposed to be the main character of your own story. And not the sidekick. Yeah.
And some people think of themselves as sidekicks, and that's not good. I don't think. Like, I get it. At least they understand, like, where they're at. But we need to, like, reposition them into being the main character.
Yeah. And Shelby says, Chris seems to be a positive role model for Emily and is validating her ideas. I love this storyline with, again, Emily establishing her roots and having ideas for the bookstore. Yeah. Working with Chris, who does seem quite awesome. Yeah. I love this, and I was telling Jason I might read the sequels just because I'm gonna need to know what happens with this bookstore situation. I just need to know. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, that's where we are.
All things told, I'm having fun. I don't know that we'll read another one, or I don't know that I would vote for another one, just because I do think that people feel uncomfortable with. Particularly chapter 16 in general. And I think that's unfortunate that we as a society feel uncomfortable about things like that. Yeah. Right? I understand like individuals feeling uncomfortable, right? Just like on a personal level. That's fine. But the idea that we're supposed to feel uncomfortable, I think is particularly unhealthy and has led to some negative outcomes in our world. But yeah, I mean, I'm having fun. It's funny.
Yeah. We've got some other romance novels on the list of recommended things, especially like Colleen Hoover. You know, she's blowing up all over the place. Lots of her books are very popular. And there was a book in particular that is on our list called Verity.
Oh, my.
And his Nana's in a book club. And so we were talking about it. And she said, this last book we read, we all burnt it. And I said, what book did you read, Nana? She said, Verity by Colleen Hoover. It was sexually explicit.
She said it. So maybe now we read it because now we gotta.
I gotta know what Nana read.
Yeah, we gotta figure it out. So Nana, if you're out there,
we
take
love
that as
you. And Nana does give us good recommendations for the book club.
I think we got West from Giraffes from her.
Yes.
We did.
Oh.
Yeah. Anyway.
One more comment.
Yeah.
Shelby says, I would have missed a lot of the abusive over and undertones of this book without the book club.
Well, I'm glad that my diatribe was able to give you something. I feel like I was unhelpful, and like part of me regrets having like said any of that stuff.
Oh.
I don't know why. I don't want people to like not have fun, and I don't want to like bring in. I want book club to be a happy place, but we shouldn't only be reading happy things, and we shouldn't. I think it's important because. How often do we get these like subliminal messages that like this is okay without realizing that we're getting those messages, and I think about that from like the perspective of being a man, and I know that women get them probably a lot more than men do, but there's so many like little hints that are dropped, especially to younger people who might be reading stuff like this, where they're like, oh, this is what it's supposed to be like, or this is normal because they have read it. There's something about reading things that makes it feel authoritative, right? Like you have read it, and so it must be true. And it happens even in fiction. And so, or you know, like what happens when your boyfriend's like something, and you're like, well, but it ended up well. He ain't real. It didn't end up any kind of way, right? So, that's all. I know you guys are all mature.
Peggy says, I'm fine with sex and body functions. I'm not okay watching pornography in a group setting. I'm a prude, but I can be uncomfortable and out of my comfort zone. And
Fair.
Peggy says, "Don't be sorry. I told Shelby the same message before we started today." So I think we're all kind of here. There's two sides of this. On one side, it's just this cute little story, and it's a summer fling, and it's fine, and it's all in good fun. And then the other side is reality, and we know that things don't go as smoothly or as whatever we're seeing in this book. There's a reality that is real, and then there's this silly little book that we're enjoying.
I can read this and have fun, but I also recognize that if this story was narrated to me by a person wearing stripes, I would write it down as part of like a treatment plan on how to like work on this, right?
Yeah.
Like I can see it both ways, right?
Yeah.
Like if somebody told me like, I mean, somebody has, right? Somebody like literally has narrated to me what Simon did when he like was fighting with her and kissed her. People have like literally told me that kind of stuff, and it wasn't funny and cute, right? And is it just because of the medium with which I was told that story? And I guess the answer is yes. And that's, I don't know, that's odd. So I'll work it out. By next week, I'll be all better.
Yeah, so we're looking forward to finishing the book.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, I can make guesses about where this is going, but I don't know.
I haven't made any guesses. This is like the one book I'm not guessing. I don't know.
So we will be making an announcement video soon about the next book, so that y'all can go ahead and get that and be ready to read. I have no idea what it's going to be. I told Jason he had to pick.
Yeah, I'm picking. So be ready. It's going to be 10 of 10 spicy.
Do we have any other hints?
It won't be that spicy. It's going to be a mystery.
You're worth it, Jason.
Thank you. Thank you. I want everybody to hear that today.
You're worth it.
Yeah, you're worth it.
You really are.
All right. We have gone for over an hour on the shortest reading we've ever had. So let's go. Some people have already logged off. They've lost interest, right? So
have they? Well,
I'm just saying it for their benefit, right? I'm not trying to like excuse them, right?
All right,
They're busy.
guys,
they got things to do.
We will see you next week.
Thank you for being here. We're reading to the end of that one, clear, right? So
oh, yes.
17
Yeah.
to the end. So
finishing this out.
See you next week. For all the new folks who stopped by this morning, we appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
We hope you had a good time. So.
Yeah. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.